Hello and welcome to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. I'm Sean Zerillo, joined today by a new crew, Derek Carty and Kyle Murray, to help you break down the slate for Friday, July 25th. Excited to have these guys here, talk some best bets, favorite underdogs, top props for this slate, maybe some futures as well, with Josh Naylor coming off the board, getting traded from Arizona to Seattle late last night. We're going to start, though, with Derek's best bet for today's slate. That is going to be in the Mariners game as the Mariners take on the Angels. Not 100% sure if Naylor is going to get there in time for this game, just because the D-backs flew to Pittsburgh and then Naylor has to fly from Pittsburgh back to LA this morning. So it's going to be a long day for Josh Naylor today, but you're taking a prop on the pitching side, which will not affect things. Brian Wu under 18.5 outs going against the very powerful Angels offense. Why do you like this bet, Derek? And where do you like it down to?
Yeah, so this best odds you can get right now are minus 125. I'm fine taking this down to, pretty considerably lower. I think closer to probably minus 110. I'm definitely good down to. Wu is a good pitcher, but he's not as good as the surface numbers this year indicate. He's gone under this number in 11 of 19 this year. So right off the bat, he's won this 58% of the time. And at minus 125, you only need 55.5% to break even. And there's regression coming. In those games that he has actually gone over, his BABIP has been under 200. His home run per fly ball has been under 5%. It's just he's getting deep in games where he can be efficient because he's getting lucky. And you should never project a guy to get lucky facing an Angels team that's actually probably a little bit underrated. Pitching into the seventh inning for anybody is a hard thing to do. And so I'm taking the under here on Wu.
Kyle Murray, welcome to the show. You have a first five total as your best bet for today's slate. I actually like the full game under here between the Orioles and Rockies, but you're going with the first five under 5 at minus 105 between Colorado and Baltimore. We'll get more on Colorado in a minute when we get to the favorite underdog section, but why do you like this first five under, and where do you like this one down to?
Yeah, I think when you look at both teams in terms of the lineups as well as the pitching matchup for both these ones, it just looks like a really good bet for me. The number's kind of all over the place. You see it at 5.5 on DraftKings. It's actually at 4.5 on some other books as well. So worth knowing that you could kind of get a nice settle here at 5. I would take this down to probably minus 125, minus 130. And I don't mind even that 4.5 number at plus money. So I'm comfortable taking this even at that under 4.5 number. But at minus 105 on at MGM right now, like the under at 5 on this first 5. Matchup wise for Kyle Freeland, obviously he gets to come out of that uncomfortable course field environment on the road. Looks a lot better there in terms of where you're looking at a lot of these underlying metrics for him. 3.76 xFIP for Freeland on the road compared to over 4.5 xFIP at home. So nice matchup there, just getting outside of the environment. And now the matchup against these Orioles, who just have been horrendous against left-handed pitching so far this season. This projected lineup has a combined ISO of 0.097, combined WOBA of 0.252. So it's a brutal matchup for this Orioles team just because they cannot hit lefties whatsoever. So I like Freeland here in the spot. On the other side, Dean Kramer obviously has had a couple of good starts in a row. Matchup is one that I think he can definitely get around here, as this Rockies team is one that's going to likely load up on righties. Kramer has been much better against righties this season with a 0.13 ISO allowed and 0.296 WOBA allowed against righties. Those numbers are both much better against those right-handed side than the lefties. So like Kramer in this spot and right-handed, what we're projecting to be a right-handed heavy lineup against the Rockies.
My favorite bet for today is going to be the Seattle Mariners. Assuming Josh Naylor gets there in time, I make about a 10-cent boost, taking them from about minus 137 to minus 147, assuming Naylor is going to be in their lineup tonight. But more so, I think the Mariners in the futures market are my favorite bet today. Find a way to bet Seattle today. I talked about this earlier in the week. Consensus futures projection, not just the bat, not just oopsie, but every single futures projection out there, ATC, Fangraphs, Pacoda, says the Mariners are a value team right now. I'll get Derek's opinion in a moment, but every single mathematical projection says the Mariners are a value team right now to make the playoffs, to win the AL West, to win the AL pennant, and to win the World Series. Average projection out there right now, around 77% to make the playoffs, roughly minus 350. I would take that up to minus 300. I think they're around minus 250 in the projection or in the betting market currently. Average division projection, about plus 300 currently. You can get as high as plus 360, I think. I'd take that down to plus 335. AL pennant average projection, about plus 733, roughly 14%. You could take that down, or sorry, roughly plus 616. You could take that down to plus 733. And then the average World Series projection, about 7% right now for Seattle. You could take that down to 19-1. Assuming other teams make moves, yes, you can take away a percentage point here or there. Those will go back up if the Yankees make improvements, if other teams in the AL race end up making improvements. But I do think over the past week, since the All-Star break, it's been the consensus value futures team in the market, going out and getting Josh Naylor, who was the one bat I said that I wanted for them, the one move that I actually wanted them to make, just a perfect fit. One, because he adds another left-handed bat to their lineup. Two, fills a corner where they had a huge need, especially at first base. Three, he immediately has the lowest strikeout rate on the team, a team that strikes out a pretty good amount. Josh Naylor strikes out 12% of the time, the 13th lowest rate among 163 qualified hitters this season. And he also walks a lot too. So now you have a lineup where Crawford is going to grind you, Raleigh is going to grind you, Rosarena is going to grind you, and then Naylor is going to grind you down too. They have a lot of guys who are going to take a lot of pitches, force you to throw a lot of pitches, get deep into bullpens, and then potentially wear teams down in the playoffs. So I like the Seattle team, and I do not think they are done yet. They did not give up a lot for Josh Naylor. I think they have more than enough pieces to go out and get you Eugenio Suarez or another reliever or other pieces to strengthen this team by the deadline. So the fact that they struck first, the fact that they struck a week in advance of the deadline tells me the Mariners are not done making moves. I think consensus futures value across the board worth betting into right now, and my favorite team in the futures market. Derek, since you do own one of those projections, I want to go to you first. Any value for you on the Mariners in terms of actually wanting to bet it? And then any other teams that you would consider betting from a futures perspective right now before we get to the deadline in a few days? Anybody you anticipate making big moves that you want to jump on now?
Yeah, Mariners, I'm totally on board with. They would probably be my favorite at this point. I'm not as big on Josh Naylor maybe as you are, but I do think he's a good fit for the team because they have a hole. His bat speed's down this year. His barrels are down this year. His all sorts of his exit velocity. His exit velocity on fly balls has been terrible this year. Like there's a lot of things about him that I don't love. And there's a huge gap between the Bat X, which includes the StatCast stuff, and the Bat, which doesn't. The Bat X likes him a lot less than the Bat does when you include the StatCast stuff, but it's still a good fit. He still would add, I would think, probably close to a win to this team. And this is a team that was a value to begin with, like you said, around 77% to make the playoffs on the aggregate. The bat rather is 76.2% before you account for Naylor. So it's right there. You're getting value on pretty much all these markets on the Mariners. So I'm definitely on board with these.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the bat speed stuff and the barrel rate stuff with Naylor, because Arizona is a park that kills left-handed power. And last year, Naylor was in Progressive Field where they had that wind tunnel blowing out to right field where he took advantage of and cleared 30 home runs for the first time in his career. So I agree. I don't think he's necessarily a 30 home run bat, even going potentially to a slightly more advantageous park for power. I don't think that's really the case in Seattle, but the high contact ability, the ability to hit, 280, 290 the rest of the way and drive in runners. The back half of that Mariners lineup, there's just too many times where they were leaving guys on base. Adding another bat, lengthening the lineup a bit, I think is exactly what they needed. You add one more, I think they're the best team in the American League. Kyle, any opinion that you have, positive or negative, on the Mariners, and then any other teams you might like from a futures perspective right now, less than a week out from the deadline?
Yeah, I think I'll just piggyback off a couple of things you guys said real quick on the Mariners. I mean, I think I do agree that they're probably a decent value here, even if they didn't make the Naylor move, just because they're getting healthier pitching wise. Obviously, when you look at the team in front of them, the Astros, they've been kind of sun running all year, right? They've had a lot of things go their way. I think they're playing a bit over their heads, so I don't mind approaching Seattle as a team with value even before the Naylor move. And then second point, I don't think they're done. I think Suarez would be a nice move. I think it's going to be a competitive market there for Suarez, with especially how he's been playing over the last week or so. But nonetheless, I think that would be a great fit. I do think Naylor was a great addition to the team to remove that sort of not necessarily weak spot, but that platoon spot here for Seattle, and just kind of solidify the first base position. Would love to see them solidify the third base position though as well. Get both those corners locked up, maybe add a couple bullpen arms, and get healthier amongst the starting pitching. I do think that would go a long way for the Seattle team to catch up against the Astros. So I like that one quite a bit. In terms of other future plays, nothing really sticking out too much for me, but I guess if you wanted to continue to piggyback off of this Tigers downslide, either look to revert that and maybe look into the AL winning market as well, or just look to potentially look for a long shot. Obviously, when you're just looking on DraftKings, right, I haven't shopped around too much, but Guardians 14-1, Twins 22-1 to win the Central. I kind of believe that the Tigers are going to get back to normal at some point, but it has been a pretty brutal stretch, and this was a team that did have concerns for me, just as a team that could have potentially been playing a bit above their pay grade. So that's a spot that I'd be looking at with maybe some volatility to attack.
Yeah, if you're interested in laying some juice, I'm starting to come around to betting the Tigers not to win the American League, like minus 700 or whatever it would be. We'll wait till they get to the playoffs, wait till they potentially get a first round bye, but I'm fading the Tigers, I think, on playoff time. I had a future on them from the preseason. I don't like the way they're trending directionally. Jackson Jobe not coming back. Flaherty nowhere near what he was last year. So Tigers kind of running out, Skubal, and then everything else. The Tigers are playing at an 85 win pace in games not started by Tarik Skubal. I think they're 15-5 in Skubal starts, and they're much closer to 500 in games not started by Tarik Skubal. Glad you brought up the injury thing, Kyle. Before we move on, that was my last piece on the Mariners that I neglected to mention. Victor Robles, currently doing baseball activities, not coming back too far away. Bryce Miller, doing baseball activities, probably not too far away. And also Gregory Santos, a reliever they traded for in the preseason, also on the mend as well. So I do think, in addition to the Josh Naylor move, Mariners guys who are currently on the IL all coming back, and the Astros guys who are currently on the IL, Yordan, Isaac Paredes. There's a ton of guys on the Astros IL. It's amazing that they are in first place given the number of dudes they have on the IL. But I don't think any of those guys are expected to come back necessarily anytime soon. Maybe Jake Myers first back amongst them. So yeah, the health of the rosters right now, I think, does give the Mariners a path to potentially catching up in the division. But let's move on from some futures talk and from the Mariners and talk about the lowly Colorado Rockies, because Kyle already gave out a bet on the Rockies. Derek's going to give out a bet on the Rockies, and then I'm going to give out a bet on the Rockies as well. So Derek, give me your favorite home run prop for today in that game between the Orioles and the Rockies.
Yeah, I'm looking at Brenton Doyle to hit a home run at plus 850 is the best odds. You can find it at a couple books right now. Doyle had this monster breakout year last year and has not been good this year. And I think if you're just looking at the surface numbers, it looks like last year was the outlier. He wasn't that great before that. He had this big year, and now he's coming back down to earth. But if you look at the underlying metrics, the StatCast stuff, he's doing the same thing he did last year. His bat speed, his barrels, his exit velocity, like it's all the same. I think he's kind of just getting unlucky. Looking at a good matchup today in a park that the markets, I think, tend to underestimate the home runs in. And I think his talent level is probably underestimated as well. So I'm seeing some good value at this number.
As I said, I like the over in that game when Kyle was giving out the first 500. I did bet the over. I like it to 9 at minus 122. It's going to be really hot in Baltimore today. Not particularly humid, but 96 degrees at first pitch, and it's going to feel like 101 on the field. Not particularly strong wind, but enough to raise my total up to about 9.8. Hopefully it stays under for the first 5 for Kyle, and then the bullpens blow this one up late. But Kyle, we both like the Rockies on the money line today. I bet them at plus 185. You bet them at plus 180. I projected them around plus 150. This is the first time I have bet the Rockies on the road this season. So it's a little bit of a hold your nose play, but at the same time, there was enough value in the projection that I had no choice but to fire at this one. Felix Bautista going down for the Orioles bullpen during this week as well. So Orioles really struggling. It's going to be a miserable finish for them over the next couple months. But where do you like the Rockies down to today? Any other bets you have on this game, and why do you like it in general?
Yeah, I think even if you wanted to take this one in the first 5, Colorado, I believe the best number over there was plus 155. I like that as well. I would take this one down probably plus 160, plus 165 or so. But for me, it's really unfortunate that we're back in the Rockies, but it's more so for me a fade of the Orioles here in this spot. And yes, it is gross back in the Rockies, and especially, Kyle Freeland. But like I mentioned earlier, Freeland has actually been pretty good on the road. 3.73 xFIP compared to a 4.5 xFIP at home. That's really no surprise considering he has to pitch in Coors Field. But for me, the big thing is he's able to attack the strike zone more. He doesn't necessarily need to feel like he needs to pitch around hitters. That's why you see that walk rate drop so significantly on the road. And when you look at this lineup for the Orioles, they just cannot hit lefties. I already mentioned the numbers at the top. So don't need to go over those again, but they are just one of the worst teams in baseball against left-handed pitching. So this plays more so a fade of the Orioles, and then you're just getting kind of a good number with some value because of that on the Rockies, who are actually rolling out a decent lineup. I did mention it's going to be a right-handed heavy lineup, which is one that I think Kramer has more chances to be successful against, but still plenty of power and plenty of guys in this spot to take advantage of a couple runs here. Again, I'm not expecting them to need a ton because I'm not expecting a ton of offensive production from the Orioles against the lefty, especially early on against Freeland.
So another bet that you like as well, you're taking the Astros team total over and also a player prop in today's game against the Athletics. I believe the A's are starting a lefty. Is it Springs? Is that correct?
Yep, Springs on the hill. So usually when that's the case, that's kind of when the Astros come into play a little bit more for me against a lefty. When you're looking at this lineup, obviously they're going to be a team that rolls out a ton of right-handed hitting, obviously dealing with a lot of injuries. But against lefties, they've been much better so far this season. Obviously, you have Cam Smith, who becomes more of a league average hitter compared to when he's facing right-handed pitching. Yainer Diaz is one of my favorite hitters to attack against left-handed pitching. So lineups looks a lot better. So I'm taking the over 4.5 team total for the Astros, as well as Yainer Diaz and his over 1.5 total bases, which is at even money. And then the home run prop for Diaz plus 400. So I like those plays for the Astros tonight.
My favorite underdog on the board right now, the Atlanta Braves at plus 145 in a bullpen game, expected to piggyback Dane Dunning with Joey Wentz. I like them down to plus 135, projected them closer to plus 125. Brian Snitker has not been good in bullpen games this season. In fact, if I was going to pick a reason why the Braves should fire Brian Snitker, it's his management of bullpen games, because they've had multiple games where they've tried to throw Aaron Bummer for a third inning, just like extending these relievers who have no business when you have a fully healthy bullpen behind them. That said, given the number of leads the Braves bullpen, number of huge leads the Braves bullpen has blown this year, I can't necessarily blame Snitker for trying to get as many outs as possible with his actual starting pitcher. But Texas has been one of the best under teams this season. The ball is just not flying in Texas this year. I do not know what is going on with the park factor relative to previous years, because typically it's fine for home runs, if not above average for home runs and run scoring. This year, it is suppressing runs at a very significant degree. Maybe it's just variance, or maybe with these baseballs in that humidor, it's just not flying as much as we're typically accustomed to. But I make this total about 7.5, assuming the Braves will be relatively aggressive, bringing relievers in and out after an off day. I like the under 8 to minus 108, and I like the Braves down to plus 125. Neglected to mention, Austin Riley expected to be back for the Braves offense tonight. He was expected to come back earlier in the week. I bet the Braves in that game against the Giants, they got blown out 9-0 despite us getting some COV, and he didn't ultimately come back. But he is expected to be back for Atlanta tonight. Let's move on to our final bets for this Friday slate. Derek has a strikeout prop and a walk prop, but not for pitchers, for hitters, that he's going to be giving out today. I love these individual hitter, walk, and strikeout props. One of these guys, I'm gonna be honest. If you are a casual baseball fan, you may not know either of the guys that Derek is about to put out here on these K and walk props. So Derek, maybe you should tell people what teams these guys are on so they can actually find them when they're clicking around the books, in addition to what the actual props are.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I'm doing Anthony Siegler, who is on the Milwaukee Brewers, to draw a walk today at plus 260. This is a guy who only has been up in the majors for a handful of games. Hasn't really done anything so far, but if you look at what he did in the minors, his walk rates were just off the chart at every single level. He projects as a well above average walk rate guy. He's facing Cal Quantrill, and so we're getting a good price on him here. In terms of the hitter strikeout under, we're going with Cody Freeman, who, again, you maybe haven't heard of, and that's okay, but he plays for the Texas Rangers, facing Joey Wentz, who is obviously not a big strikeout guy to begin with, and with a 42% pinch hit risk and Wentz not fully stretched out, like there's a real chance we see 2 plate appearances here for Cody Freeman. So I like that one quite a bit.
I love Derek saying the phrase 42% pinch hit risk. You know that Derek is modeling this stuff down to the nitty gritty if he's giving you a pinch hit risk at 42% on the nose. Love that, Derek. Love the analysis there. Love you bringing guys to the show that, frankly, I model these games out every day, guys. I'm not necessarily looking at the back half of these lineups, new guys who were called up recently. I saw these names in the sheet. I expected it to be Freeman from the Rockies, and then I saw Cody, and I was like, who is Cody Freeman? So Spiegler, I was aware of. Cody Freeman, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I had no idea the Rangers brought this guy up. So love you bringing in those odds. Love you bringing in some props that are going to be way off the board for people, very niche and specific. Kyle, you're going with one of my favorite dudes in the league this year, Large Barge, Addison Barger, over 1.5 total bases, and to hit a bomb tonight. I also like the over in this game between the Blue Jays and the Tigers. The Tigers have not been hitting at all of late, so maybe your approach taking the Jays team total over could be the better route. So give me your analysis on Jays and Tigers.
Yeah, liking the spot here for the Blue Jays. Obviously, they were off to a pretty slow start. Reese Olson kind of shut them down last night until I think it was the 6th inning when he gave up 4 or 5 runs before exiting. I think AJ Hinch probably should have went out there and got him a bit earlier, but sort of let them out to die. And then obviously the Blue Jays had some success against the back end of the Tigers bullpen. I wouldn't be too concerned, or I guess if you're betting this Blue Jays prop, I'm not too excited about a weakened Tigers bullpen. They didn't really use any key arms here, but I think the big thing here for me is I think they'll be able to attack Carty Montero in a spot where he just has not been good, especially against lefties. I do think there's a potential weakness here where a lot of these righties in this lineup is where you're mostly getting the production from, guys like Springer, Vlad, Bichette, but nonetheless, I think there's a couple of big lefties in this lineup. Obviously, Addison Barger, one of my favorites as well. Luke's has had a couple of good games as of late. Loperfido went yard yesterday. So I do like the ability to sort of scatter out some of these lefties in this lineup. And I just don't think Montero is a very good pitcher here so far this season. But for Barger, like I mentioned, Montero has some pretty significant splits against lefties, 267 ISO against left-handed hitting compared to 122 ISO so far this season against righties. So I think there's a nice split advantage here for Barger, who has been crushing righties, 266 ISO, 381 WOBA, a lot of solid hard contact and barrel numbers for Barger as well. So I like his over 1.5 total bases at plus 105, as well as that home run prop, which at plus 475, I think is some pretty solid value. I do think there's maybe going to be some wind blowing in here from the right field side, which would not be ideal for Barger, but it doesn't look like anything too significant. So I think there is some value here at plus 475 for the home run prop.
Yeah, it was relatively light wind. I think it was about 3 miles an hour. It might have even been coming in from left field when I looked earlier, but it wasn't enough to take me off of the over. My total adjusted up closer to about 9.4. So that's why I like the over 9 to minus 105. A few other totals that I have on my card. You can find the price targets for these in the Action Network app, and you can also follow me in the app for one other potential addition I might be making later today. But the Phillies and Yankees, I like over 10 up to minus 112. The Rays and Reds over 9.5 to minus 115. And the Red Sox and Dodgers, maybe my favorite of the three, over 9.5 up to 10 at minus 115. I'm waiting on the D-backs and Pirates for an umpire. I also anticipated that with Naylor getting traded, that total might drop from 9 to 8.5. So we'll see where the direction of that total goes after the anticipated lineups come out, after the umpire comes out. That is likely the only one that I will be adding. The Twins, we got some good CLV on overnight, out of range at the moment. But I should mention, over the next week, as you're considering betting on these games, just be wary of dudes who may get traded. If the Twins just decide, hey, today we're trading Griffin Jax and Yohan Duran, you are not going to want a Twins money line ticket without their two best relievers in their bullpen. So just be a little bit more careful, a little bit more reserved in terms of volume over the next 6 days or so, and particularly on the 30th and the 31st, just betting teams who are likely to trade guys out of their roster and leaving you with a ticket that you might not want to be holding. But that'll do it for today's episode of Payoff Pitch. Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to tell some of the bets that we discussed on today's show, make sure to look for the quick slip links both in the episode description or in the video description. And don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app. It leaves us that 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast. Also, check out the Action Network Discord. There's a link in the episode description of this show. We'll be back on Monday with another episode of Payoff Pitch. You can tune into that episode live on YouTube at 10 a.m. Eastern. For Derek Carty and Kyle Murray, I'm Sean Zerillo. Thank you for listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. Best of luck with your bets. We'll see you next time.